Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Isabel and we're going to talk about the books I read during the month of October. I started the month with a rom-com, A Scene in TV by Meredith Shore. And I really wanted to have small town vibes and kind of like Emily Henry and Gilmore Girls and just something very wholesome and cute. I wasn't feeling spooky season yet. I was just feeling like I wanted some romance and I wanted it to be especially sweet. So I read A Scene in TV and it was okay. I feel like a lot of people were describing it, oh, it's like Gilmore Girls. It gives you Gilmore Girl vibes. It's like, yes, but it was too much like Gilmore Girls, especially at the beginning. The banter between the mother-daughter, the small town of it all, and just the fact that the book references Gilmore Girls over and over again. I'm like, I understand. I wanted something more subtle. I didn't want it to be like right in your face. A Scene in TV is a story about a young journalist girl that lives with her mom in New York, really wants to start her career, become a full-time writer, and she needs money. Therefore, she pitches a story to a magazine editor that she works in, and she's like, I'm going to go to a small town and I'm going to kind of depict how of a Hallmark movie it is. And it's based on this whole assumption. She reads that there is a business mogul going to buy the land and to build like a big tower. And she's following the story through the lens of a Hallmark movie. That being that there's going to be a small town girl or some girl that is going to try to stop this guy and they're going to fall in love and the town is going to be quirky and cute. You know the story. And starting from this premise, I feel like that was a very juvenile point of view. And of course, we know going into the story that she's going to face that reality is not a movie and that her assumptions are very, I don't know, off and juvenile, as I said. And it happens pretty quickly. And she's also trying to find love because New York is not a place for dating, as we've seen in Sex and the City and every other story based in New York. And that was it. Like, that was the premise. It happens. And not only it shows her that her assumptions were childish, it happens over and over again. And she still doesn't understand. She doesn't fully grasp it. And it was kind of like a low point. I was reading and I was thinking it's going to get better and it's going to get better. And it was just very mid. I gave it 3 stars, but I feel like it should have been 2. I feel like, I don't know. Right now I'm rethinking it and maybe like, yeah, maybe 2 stars. But I feel like that was too harsh because I think of the previous book that I given 2 stars to and that was disastrous. So just very mid. Almost didn't make it 3-star book. Then because I needed to scratch that itch that A Scene in TV didn't scratch, I went with a known route and I read Take a Hint, Dani Brown. If you remember, I think it was July when I read the first book of the series about the Brown sisters by Talia Hibbert. And I feel like Talia Hibbert is a really good author as she takes archetypes of characters and she overcomplicates them. Well, not overcomplicates them, but humanizes them and gives them a lot of layers. Especially the male interest. She always gives them a soft side and a dark side and a quirky, lovable side. And she really makes this love interest be humans and complex. It makes you want to fall in love with them or you fall in love with them as the story progresses. And of course, the spicy scenes are always good. And I think that Dani Brown as a character was a very interesting choice coming from Chloe, because even though they're sisters, their personalities are very different. And I felt a bit afraid to go into the second book because I didn't want to rehash the same novel I had just read in July. I wanted a different voice, and I was like, if this is within the same universe, it might be complicated for Hibbert to bring new voices into like the protagonist roles, but I was totally wrong. She did it amazingly. I think that she balances giving complex personalities, but also making them vulnerable and vulnerable to the reader, not only to other characters. And I like that in this novel, yeah, we also see Chloe and Red from the previous one, but it's very centered on social media. Dani Brown and Saf, they both work in a university. She is a PhD student and he is a security guard. And they have a friendship, a bit of banter in the morning. He has a huge crush on her. But one day during a fire drill, she gets stuck in an elevator and he rescues her. And from this moment, that is not a meet cute per se, but it's just like a moment of a lot of passion and emotions, someone records it and that video goes viral. They decide to go into like fake dating because Saf has a charity foundation and he needs the publicity, and he's like, hey, you know, this and that, and she's like, sure, why not? Dani Brown is not dating and she's only looking for casual sex, but she is a good friend, and she's like, sure, we can do this and maybe I'll get in bed with you, or she thinks that. But Saf is really looking for his soulmate, and he's a romantic and he reads romance books. So here we have that same trope that we see before of like the guy that only wants sex and the girl that wants love, and it's reversed. But it's very well done because it doesn't depend on the gender. And you see where each of them come from, and it's very legitimate to their own characters into the story. And I think that as a character, Saf puts the bar very high for other men, just like Red did in the other book. Because he is in touch with his feelings, he goes to therapy, he is handsome and he's strong and he's funny and he's respectful, and you're like, that's the bare minimum. And still we have all of other characters in stories as well that don't even do that. Like, these are the type of romances that I like endorsing because they literally raise your standards up, instead of toxic rehashing of the same love tropes that we have seen in other movies and in other novels that are way more popular. I feel like, I mean, this is a popular series, but I feel like the highlight should be the male characters, and I don't see a lot of attention towards that, but hopefully it will change. I gave it 4 stars out of 5, I mean 4.5. Just because as part of a series, I feel that Chloe and Red in the first book touch so many sensible areas that I cried during those moments in that book. And in this one, there are sensible and traumatic moments and exploration of that trauma and working through that baggage, but it still felt more lighthearted in a way. And yeah, I mean, apparently now the rating is based if I cried or not, but just because they are in a series together, that's how I have to consider the first book. But if they were from different authors or from different series, I probably would have ranked this more. But just because of the context of the trilogy, that's what the rating is. Next, I read The Pursuit of Love that I have. I know, it's very rare to have physical books in this channel, but we do have it because it was for a class and it was cheap to buy online. So The Pursuit of Love by Nancy Mitford is a very interesting read. Pursuit of Love is a book from 1945, and even though it is very set in that time era, it's kind of like a glimpse into the socialite lives of British upper classes. It doesn't feel very dated. It feels fresh and like humanizing to the satire that it represents. To give more background information, Nancy Mitford was from this social class, and from this portrayer that she is representing are mostly based on people she knew and from her family members. And I think I'm going to do a review, probably is the next review in this channel, so I'm not going to go too into details of like analysis of the novel. But the comedy aspects in it makes the characters feel very human and flawed, and it's still you want the, but still you will be like, okay, I don't want to have anything to do with you if I would ever meet you in real life. The narrator of our novel is Fanny, and she tells us the story of her cousin Linda Ratley. And not only Linda, but the Ratley family in general, as she spent a lot of time with them growing up, and they were very upper aristocratic family in the in-between war period. So after World War I and then into World War II, we follow this family and we follow Linda as our main character. Linda is kind of like a force of nature. She is very irrational and very childish and very immature and very self-centered. I feel like that is the main point of her, but she doesn't know any better. Part of her education in this class system and what is expected of her kind of sets her up for failure. She is very passionate, so she follows these instincts without thinking through. And our character Fanny, because she's her cousin and loves her, kind of tries to make excuses for her, but still we can see the difference in the class system and how having an education and having more of an interest in other people and not being self-centered shapes the differences in them since they're very young. Linda firstly falls in love in like the most fairy tale way, I guess, like very instant and without getting to know the guy very well. And he ends up being a very boring bank German guy that doesn't align with what she's interested in and demands this type of like very traditional wife that she's not willing to be. So she leaves him and then she finds another guy, and this guy is like a radical communist and he demands her to be interested in things, and she kind of like pretends for a while, but ultimately she doesn't understand the cause because, I don't know, she's very privileged in her own ways of thinking. And it's like, well, why is everyone bothered about these things? Why can't we just like hang out and party? And that doesn't work out. She leaves him again. And then she kind of gets this reputation of bolting and leaving. But she doesn't seem to be very concerned about that reputation. Again, this is called The Pursuit of Love, and she's looking for love. But it also, the book also questions, what is love? And is it worth pursuing it? Or is that our idea of what we pursued as love more just like infatuation, that it irremediably goes down and waters down into, you're not the person that I thought you were because I made you up in my head and I just took your body as a model. I don't know. I think that people that really enjoy The Great Gatsby would enjoy The Pursuit of Love. And it's kind of mentioned, the 1920s is mentioned in The Pursuit of Love, and from one character who is kind of like the precursor of Linda, because they also call her the bolter, and she also had many lovers and kind of like moved around places, non-conforming with traditional gender roles and matrimony and all of that. And that character is said to be stuck in the 1920s. And what they mean is like this, what we see in The Great Gatsby as the 1920s. And I feel like both of these books really represent what we don't see. I feel like now we are very critical, and we should always be very critical of class privilege and race privilege and all the other types of privileges that we have. But they also open up our eyes, or at least for me that I'm not upper class, to how clueless they are. I'm not saying to make excuses for rich people at all, but it also shows you that they're kind of products of their own impossible standards and their own traditions, and how lonely it feels, but also how detached from reality they are. Like if you read The Great Gatsby with a critical view of class and economics, you cannot stand Daisy Buchanan. And even when you try to make apologies for her, you cannot stand her. And you can see how the story of the self-made man is really a myth, because you're never going to be included in the inner circles. Well, we see the same here with The Pursuit of Love, but because we have, and it's recreated that of the narrator being close to the main character, but we never getting into the mind of the main character, it kind of keeps up with that idea of we don't really know this person, we only know how the others see them. And because the others come from a different background, it's not very possible to empathize in a deeper level. But I feel The Pursuit of Love makes more credible characters, or at least more memorable than those in The Great Gatsby. That in The Great Gatsby, they tend to be very stuffy and just archetypical characters that we don't see beyond what we just assume of them. And that's not to say and be like, oh, The Pursuit of Love is better than The Great Gatsby, don't read The Great Gatsby. I'm just thinking that if you like those moments of looking into the upper class and to their lives and their psyche and just the opulence of it all and the parties and how detached they are from reality. The Pursuit of Love does that in a slightly more digestible way and at least more introspective, which I appreciate. You know that I love The Great Gatsby, or I don't know if you know it, but I do love The Great Gatsby. And yes, The Pursuit of Love has a lot of those vibes, but it still feels very fresh. And again, from a book that is written so long ago, well, not so long ago, but long enough for us to be detached from it, I think it's amazing. And I've heard that there's a BBC adaptation and I think also a Prime Video adaptation, I'm not sure. So I gave The Pursuit of Love 4 out of 5 stars. It's also a very short book. I know that here it looks thick, but this one has the sequel, Love in Cold Climate, that I've heard it touches upon homosexuality, which it's a bit risque for the time, but not so much. I'm interested in seeing how it is depicted actually. But see, this is The Pursuit of Love. See, it's not that long. It's 150 pages. So if you were looking for a fresh, funny satire type of read, this would be great. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Towers of Trebizond by Rose Macaulay. And I don't know, this is a novel from 1956. So again, it's a different tone, it's a different writing style. It's not very long, but I felt like the narration was all over the place. There were a lot of comedic moments, especially at the first part. And it talks a lot about religion and just British imperialism, that at some moments I was laughing with the book and at other moments I was like, I don't know if it's really that self-aware of a book as it pretends to be or as the voice comes across. And I also felt like at moments it was very tiresome because it talked about the same thing over and over again: the Anglican Church, the Catholic Church, the position of women in Turkey, and the running gags. I feel like maybe if you are British or you have a good sense of British culture, this might be more funny to you than it was to me. Or I feel like I have enough British culture to go by and know the references. However, maybe the humor appeals more to a British audience. I don't know. That's just a guess. And what is this book about? This book is a travel narrative about a group of 3 people, on Dodd, Father Chantry Pig, and Laurie. They're all British people and they are going to a trip with Turkey. In Turkey, they also meet with another woman that is a Turkish woman, but she converted to the Anglican Church. So this trip is to take religion to Turkish women and to emancipate women. We see that is the pretense of the book. And we see that is the premise of why are they going, but each one of the characters have their own agenda and what they're trying to do with this trip. It's an absurd story. It's like, I'm not trying to say take this book very seriously because I don't think it wants to be taken seriously at all. As I said, it has a lot of comedic moments. It pokes fun of the church and of British imperialism and just British citizens on how they think that they bring the true religion, and commentary of, is there a true religion and why does everyone think that their religion is a true religion? And it's not very long. I don't know. I feel like when I looked for reviews for this book, there was a lot of hype. It was like, masterpiece, take my camel, what an amazing beginning. I thought it was kind of okay. Especially the ending. Once they leave Turkey, and there's a moment where the group divides and we only have Laurie as a solo traveler, and because some of the people find themselves in another country, I don't want to spoil what especially happens, but towards the end when Laurie is back in England and we're not in Turkey anymore, I'm like, what's the point of this book? Like, why is this going? Like, it's not very long, and still I felt like it was such a dread towards the end. It just bring the ending already. Like nothing is happening. We're just waiting for something that we know that is going to happen, or at least there was no question for me that that ending was coming, and it was just stretching it out just for the heck of it. Like I wasn't very attached to Lori because it's not a book that gets us like, oh, I care about the character. It's just more about the debate and the conversation about these topics, that I don't care about this character at all, and I don't want to see her life in London just paying her bills or whatever she's doing. Bring the ending already. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because there were moments that were very clever and that I enjoyed, but then there were very dull moments and a lot of repetition. So I wasn't sure what it was. I gave it a 3-star review, and I can read you what's in the back. This is something I like when I have a physical book, to read you what's in the back. It says, "The Towers of Trebizond is an utter delight, the most brilliantly witty and captivating, charming book I have read." Again, the most brilliant and witty and the most captivating, maybe that this person has read, but I feel like I've read others. But I don't know from where this review is and what the stakes were back then. Fantasy, farce, high comedy, delicious gapes at many aspects of the frenzy modern world, and a succession of illuminating thoughts about love, sex, life, churches, and religion are all tossed together with enchanting results. Yes and no. Enchanting results. Humane and shred, Rose McCauley is an engaging and idiosyncratic talent. Idiosyncratic is something I can get behind when describing this book. Again, it's the absurd, it's the satire, it's the spicy takes at the church, it's all of that. But I don't think the characters are memorable, or I don't think that there's specific moments of the book where I would say, oh, this is so memorable, this is so brilliant. It was more into the dialogue that really shined through. Another review here, it says, "Rose McCauley is so artful, so witty, so responsive. The Towers of Trebizond is a book which will irritate not only the wet afternoons of a summer holiday, but memory as well." A big poetic there. This was by the Times. The other review was at the New York Times. So yes, I wouldn't say go read The Towers of Trebizond, but here's the review about it. And that's it. Those were the books I read during the month of October. I'm sorry I didn't include a spooky read. I thought about it and I just didn't do it. Most of these books I read for class. Well, half and half. Take a Hint, Dani Brown, and A Scene in TV were obviously my picks. Romance, you know. And The Towers of Trebizond and The Pursuit of Love were for one of my classes. I also read Utopia by Thomas More, but that I'm going to include probably for the next month, as I have this copy that is 3 early modern Utopia. So I'm going to read first the 3 of them and then review the book. Although I could include it within this month, as Utopia by Thomas More is a book on its own, and it doesn't have, there's the link in the book because there are 3 modern Utopias, but they're actually not thought to be together. I don't know. You probably understand what I mean. So yes, Thomas More Utopia I read as well, but I read it before, so it would be a reread. We'll see it in the November video. That's all for me, actually. Thanks for watching. Keep reading, and when you're not, follow me on all my social media, link down below. If you have any recommendation or a request for books that you know that I read, you can see that in my Goodreads, or that I mentioned here in my monthly wrap-ups, but I didn't actually do a full video on them, and you want to see that, I can totally do that. I keep a reading journal. I have a good memory. I can talk about books that I've read before. They don't have to be too fresh. But yes, thank you so much. I will see you in the next video. Bye!